A warm welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. World leaders have been arriving at the Egyptian resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh to kick off another climate summit, better known as COP27 this year. Nearly 200 countries will be gathered for the UN climate conference, with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Leaders are expected to discuss compensating poor nations for mountain damage linked to global warming, placing the controversial topic on the agenda for the first time since climate talks began decades ago. And kicking things off in Egypt today, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the world leaders that they face a stark choice of either working together now to cut emissions or condemn future generations to climate catastrophe. A speech set the tone as leaders mull over the next 2 weeks on how to avert the worst climate change, even as they're distracted by Russia's war in Ukraine, rampant consumer inflation, and energy shortages.
This UN climate conference is a reminder that the answer is in our hands. And the clock is ticking. We are in the fight of our lives, and we are losing. Greenhouse gas emissions keep growing. Global temperatures keep rising. And our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. And to avoid that dire fate, all G20 countries must accelerate their transition now in this decade. Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. It is either a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact.
Just a while ago, my colleague Layo Olarinde spoke with the VOA's Edward Uranian, who's already in Sharm el-Sheikh, about the topical issues for this year's summit.
What's the mood like in Sharm el-Sheikh, given as, you know, the COP27 kicks off?
Well, listening to the UN Secretary General, he certainly painted a very negative picture of the world. I don't know whether he can back up what he said, but he certainly didn't paint a very positive, rosy picture. A lot of the other speakers didn't either. Many of the things they were presenting as facts to me seemed like they were debatable. For instance, Christine Lagarde, the head of the European Central Bank, was saying that we need to switch from gas, natural gas, to wind power and solar power because it's more stable for the economy. And I don't see any proof of that. I haven't seen any proof at all. And most of these same countries that are saying things like that are moving over to natural gas and trying to get natural gas out of the Mediterranean right now. So they say one thing, they do another, and nobody is on the same wavelength. I mean, everyone has his own agenda item, everyone has his own need, every country has his own need. And the most important item that I heard at the summit, nobody even seemed to carry. They didn't even bother to carry President Sisi's remark that the most important thing right now is to end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and that seems much more important than a lot of the other things they're discussing, to be honest with you.
Well, you know, this summit has been described as an African COP, giving priority to the continent, and we know the continent has been suffering devastating effects of climate change. We have some African presidents who are also attending, you know, the summit. How, you know, is Africa expected to benefit from this meeting?
Well, I think Egypt is hoping to benefit from the meeting as well, and I think a lot of countries are hoping to get a little bit of money to do some climate projects that really need to be done. The one thing I saw out of Egyptian media was that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was giving $4.2 billion over 4 years to various countries, which is pretty much a drop in the bucket, but that's the only thing I've seen mentioned. And all the other countries are accusing each other of being responsible for the problem, and nobody seems to have a lot of money to throw around. So I think Egypt is sounding rather disappointed that they're not expecting a lot out of what they were originally expecting. And I don't know what other African countries were expecting, but I mean, I honestly wouldn't be expecting a lot.
All right, Edward, just before I let you go, let's talk about the Egypt's human rights record. I mean, there have been critics that have been saying, you know, this summit shouldn't hold for reasons concerning Egypt's human rights track record. What are we hearing concerning that, about that?
Mostly from the BBC. I've heard a lot on the BBC Arabic service. It's mostly Britain that's making this noise, usually Britain that makes the noise. And I mean, it has really nothing to do with the climate, to be honest with you. So, and the mere fact that all these countries, the leaders of all these countries showed up means that this is not very high up on their agenda, which is not to dismiss it. I mean, I feel sorry for anyone who's in prison unfairly. But it's really not a climate issue, and it has nothing to do with the summit whatsoever.
All right, then. VOA's Edward Iranian, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
And one of the big players in the climate change agreements will be the United States. All eyes will be on the U.S. And what they bring to the table to COP27. President Joe Biden, his crowning message, we expect two leaders in Sharm el-Sheikh will be trumpeting that the U.S. finally passing a major legislation to slow dangerous global heating. But thoughts of the president and delegates from around the world are likely to nervously fit to events that are just about 6,000 miles away, which of course are the U.S. elections. The climate talks, however, begin today. More than 90 heads of state, of course, the Biden administration is aiming to enter COP27 and a mood of determined optimism. Officials have said in a briefing, having successfully secured passage of the landmark Inflation Reduction Act, all thanks to Democratic votes in Congress over the summer. It's a $370 billion package to boost energy, clean energy, that is, the first significant climate bill ever enacted by the U.S. White House attempts to portray the U.S. as an empowered standard bearer of climate action risks being undermined just today into the conference with the elections in the minds of many, including the president himself. But President Biden is expected in Sharm el-Sheikh on November 11, as shortly after the midterm elections, just before the full results are announced. The prospects of the president's program being partially unpicked by Republicans' gains would dampen hopes of further progress in the world's largest historical emitter of greenhouse gases. President Biden is expected to arrive with a good message that it's a leader on climate, but the political winds could change very quickly. And one who knows that better than we do is our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, who's been monitoring the situation from miles away. Maria, we know you might not be coming with the president to Sharm el-Sheikh, but of course, are people even concerned, you know, about the climate conference, or they're more concerned about the elections that are coming up tomorrow?
Well, as we know, climate change is one of the #1 priorities, even as we head into the midterm elections. When you talk about a key issue, that's a key issue. We're now looking at historic warming that's happening across the United States. And so climate change is something that is near and dear to most Americans. We're in the month of November and have seen weather in the East Coast close to 80 degrees, which is unlike this time of year, 30 to 40 degrees higher than normal. And so climate change will definitely be on the minds of many Americans as they go to vote tomorrow in the U.S. But as it relates to President Biden heading to the climate change summit, I think that he will definitely, once we get through this Tuesday, he will begin to start to give that message to Americans, begin to kind of force Americans to adjust their thoughts and where they're looking forward to for kind of the next big area of action needs to take place in the United States. And so hopefully, as you mentioned, he will be bringing goodwill messages, but also some sort of an action plan to be able to identify how the U.S. plans to play a role in this and really how critical and key the global climate change initiative is going to be for the United States.
Well, it's interesting. Everyone is looking forward to that message. Just last year, it was quite difficult getting the big players in climate change to sit at the table and agree to reducing greenhouse gases by 1.15 degrees Celsius, or 1.5 degrees Celsius, if I remember. And now they're talking about compensation for poorer countries. How open is the U.S. to compensating poorer countries who have been borne the brunt, of climate change, just as the COP27 leaders have been saying since yesterday?
I think the U.S. will be very open to that. I think the U.S. Is looking for ways to be innovative in this effort. They know that this is much larger than the work we can do here in the U.S. We know we have a long way to go to be able to really adjust how we use energy here in the U.S. We know that we have to reduce the level of emission that we emit, but we know that's a longer term process for us. So if there are other countries that are in the efforts and can do some of the work for us that will obviously benefit us in the long run in the rest of the world, I think the U.S. would be open to that. We're dealing with wildfires in California that are ravaging. We're dealing with, obviously, as we mentioned, temperature issues. And so we're in a critical time, and I don't know if the things we can do here in the U.S. are going to move fast enough to really impact the rest of the world, and specifically the United States.
Maria, I'm wondering if President Biden has reacted to what the UN Secretary General has said today. Yesterday, he was reacting to the recent climate report by the World Meteorological Organization, about the previous 8 years being the warmest ever, for the Earth, and then warning that we're on a highway to climate hell. I wonder if President Biden has said anything regarding that, or perhaps the U.S. climate envoy, John Kerry, who's been at the forefront, of issues of climate change in the United States.
Well, John Kerry, I think, has, as you mentioned, been on the forefront, and he has been a very strong supporter of climate change, and he's been very vocal himself. So would he have disagreed? I'm not sure if he would have disagreed. Would he have said that he's used the same language? I think that is up for only time will tell with that. But I think that where we stand right now, the president obviously is very much focused on the midterm elections. We can definitely expect that he will address that. If not before he makes it to the conference here very shortly, he will address it. And we might even see him address that in some of his midterm election pronouncements, as he will be continuing to support candidates throughout the next 24 hours. So that is, I think, where the U.S. is standing with this. I think the U.S. is not trying to shy away at all. I think that they are going to continue to be vocal in the efforts to address climate change.
Looking forward to hearing their voices at the event over the next few days. Maria, thanks again for joining us. And stay with COP27, the IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, says the price of carbon needs to average at least $75 a ton globally by the end of the decade. For global climate goals to succeed. She was making the comment on the sidelines of the summit in Egypt, adding that the pace of change in the real economy is still way too slow. While some regions, such as the European Union, already price carbon at above that level, the EU's benchmark price is around 76 euros a ton. Other regions, such as the US, state of California, see carbon allowances selling for just under $30 per ton, while some have no price at all. Georgieva, however, said there are different routes a country can take. The world's second biggest emitter, the United States, for example, is unlikely to establish a national price on carbon given stiff political opposition to carbon taxes and cap and trade systems.
It's significant because to retain our dream of Paris Agreement targets, by 2030 we have to cut emissions somewhere between 25 and 30%, and 50% vis-a-vis where they were when we all gathered in COP26. This is not happening. We see the trajectory of emission reduction way too slow. And unless we step up on the gas, well, I shouldn't use the gas in that conversation. You step up on the accelerator, we are going to be unfortunately failing the Paris Agreement. Why are we slow? Well, we are slow for fundamentally two reasons. The first one is policy. We have done research, it says that carbon price is essential for the transition. Unless we price carbon predictably on trajectory that gets us at least to $75 average price per ton of carbon in 2030, we simply don't create the incentive for businesses and consumers to shift. Second, money. We are falling short on not only mobilizing public money, but in the most important role public money must play, and it is to remove the barriers for private investments on scale in emerging markets and developing countries. And this is why we created our own instrument with an eye to work on the policy side in countries to remove these obstacles for private finance. As you know, we are not a party of the negotiations, so we have no special contribution to make in that regard. What I see is a recognition that, especially for small debt-ridden economies, every climate disaster to hit is a cry for resolving this loss and damage issue. So I expect there will be progress here. And it is up to the negotiators how far they go, but at least no more there is a pretense that this issue can be put in the freezer. It's out of the freezer, it is discussed, progress will be made.
Welcome back. We're not quite done with COP27 yet. A sister of the jailed Egyptian-British activist Ala Abdel Fattah is participating in COP27 a day after her brother plans to stop drinking water 219 days into a hunger strike. Sanaa Saif plans an event with Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and the German Climate Convoy to address her brother's case. She says her brother only took a glass of water today and she's really worried and is at COP27 to put pressure on all leaders coming, especially Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
Step number one, concrete. Release him now. There is not a lot of time. Let's be very clear. We're running out of time. So if the authorities do not want to end up with a death they should have and could have prevented, they must act now. 24, 48 hours, 72 hours at the most. That's how long they have to save a life. If they don't, that death will be holding on to that COP27. It will be in every single discussion. Every single discussion there will be a laser. What the government gave, it took back. Much more, in fact. That is not a concrete action. That is not an incremental step towards addressing the dire human rights situation. Let it be very clear. We cannot be fooled. Let me repeat that. We will not be fooled. The government cannot spin itself out of the situation. It must take concrete, visible, authentic, legitimate actions, not releasing some people and imprisoning twice as many. Extraordinarily severe human rights situation in the country becomes a global priority and is not, and is squarely at the heart of COP27 agenda. In other words, yes, it's about climate justice, but you cannot deliver climate justice anywhere in the world, including in Egypt, if you don't have human rights protection. So that's that now that we're here, we need to make everything really use that as an opportunity to deliver that message.
Well, the U.S. President Joe Biden is expected at COP27 later this week, but he has, of course, to get through the U.S. midterms, which are tomorrow. President Biden has been working all weekend, warning that the elections could weaken U.S. democracy. He was making that comment on Sunday, 2 days before the vote on Tuesday. Republicans have hammered Biden for high inflation and increased crime in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, and non-partisan forecasters favor them to win control of the House of Representatives and possibly the Senate as well. Democrats' early leads in Senate races in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Nevada have evaporated. Control of even one chamber would allow Republicans to stymie Democrat Biden's legislative agenda and launch potential damaging investigations. The president warns that many Republican candidates are threatening democratic norms by echoing Trump's false claims about a stolen election in 2020.
Can you think of any other time since the Civil War where anybody said things like that, where it's happened, where violence is condoned? Look what happened. My friend Paul, I shouldn't even get in, I'll get going. But Nancy Pelosi's husband, look what the Republicans said. Some of them making fun of it or making excuses. There's never been a time in my career when we've glorified violence based on a political basis. Let me close with this. Today, as I said earlier, we face one of those inflection points. One of those moments that not only comes around every 3, 4, 5 generations. We all know it in our bones that our democracy is at risk. Latest polls say 76% of American people worry about maintaining our democracy. And we know that this is your generation's moment to defend it, to preserve it, to choose it. You know, there are more than 300 Republican candidates for state, local, and federal office who are election deniers, who say that I did not win the election, even though the hundreds of attempts to challenge that have all failed, even in Republican courts. Well, Kathy's opponent is one of those election deniers. These deniers not only are trying to deny your right to vote, they're trying to deny your right to have your vote counted. No, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. With these election deniers, there are only 2 outcomes for any election. Either they win or they were cheated. No, I'm serious. Think about it. But let me tell you something. You can't only love the country when you win. There's more. Republicans in Congress, led by South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, already introduced legislation for a national ban on the right to choose. Now, Governor Hochul is the first woman to serve as governor of New York. And on Tuesday night, with your help, she'll be the first woman elected governor of New York.
In the meantime, former U.S. President Bill Clinton was also busy on Sunday campaigning for Democratic Senate candidates Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada's tight race, as local residents urged everyone to vote.
Rather than go around demonizing Republicans, she just gets up and does what she thinks right. I know a lot of these other senators. I like a lot of them. But I'm telling you, I don't know anybody that I think does a better job of reaching the right policy decision and then figuring out how to actually get something done than Catherine Cortez Masto.
And that's why it is so important we all get out and vote.
And I haven't been in office for more than 20 years. But I continue to study the economy.
All right.
I continue to see what's going on here and what's going on around the world. And I have never felt more strongly that everything I worked for all my life is on the line now.
Seems to me that the Republicans, the only thing...
Who else was on the campaign trail? It was former President Donald Trump after testing out the new nickname for potential presidential rival Florida Governor Ron DeSantis at a rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday. Trump refocused on party unity at an event on Sunday, just ahead of the elections tomorrow. He headlined rallies in key states over the weekend to fire up voters 2 days before election night, which Republicans are pushing to flip both chambers of Congress. Trump appeared in Miami alongside the state's 2 U.S. senators and several U.S. representatives. Florida, for years, swung from party to party, but has recently trended Republican and is not considered a major battleground in this election. The former president's frequent events maintain his profile as he weighs launching a third run for the White House after the midterms, according to his advisors, that is. He has, in past rallies, hinted at the possibility of his own return to the presidential campaign trail for 2024 and says, stay tuned.
I called him a couple weeks ago. I want to make sure I had both of those votes in my... Just 2 days from now, the people of Florida are going to re-elect the wonderful, the great friend of mine, Marco Rubio, to the United States Senate. And you're going to re-elect Ron DeSantis as your governor of your state. Even the crazy New York Times today had a big piece about Hispanics coming to the Republican Party. And a lot of people say it's the Trump Party that they're coming to. I'm saying let it be the Republican Party. But you do like me, I know that. You do like me. I ran twice, I won twice, and I did much better the second time than I did the first. Getting millions and millions more votes in 2020 than we got in 2016. And likewise, getting more votes than any sitting president in the history of our country by far. And now, in order to make our country successful, safe, and glorious, I will probably have to do it again, but stay tuned.
The VOA's national correspondent Steve Herman joins us now. Here's in Washington. Steve, you've got a bird's eye view of everything, of all the preparations and all the campaigns coming up for these elections tomorrow. And I'm just wondering, this is a really tough job, isn't it? Especially for the president and the former presidents who have to join the campaign trail, rallying support for the candidates and making sure everyone gets to the polls tomorrow. Does the intensity of the campaigns, though, translate to large crowds at the polls?
Well, this is a midterm election, so there's no president on the ballot. So usually the turnout is lower than we see in a presidential year. What we do know is there's a fairly solid early voting. We have 40 million plus ballots that have already been cast. So that's a pretty good turnout and does show that there is some level of intensity from both Republican and Democratic voters.
And for the former U.S. President Donald Trump, his campaigns are really interesting, aren't they? They're more, lively. You get more sound bites from them. We've also seen President Biden and President Obama as well standing solidly behind their candidates. It's been a while we've seen, this sort of movement, especially since the campaign in 2020, the election, beg your pardon, in 2020. How much of their reputation, however, is on the line as regards the kinds of candidates that they're supporting, what they represent as well?
Well, for the former presidents, I don't think too much is on the line. We should note one of those former presidents, Donald Trump, is more than likely to be announcing within a week or so that he's going to run again. So a lot of those appearances are perhaps more about Donald Trump than the candidates he's supporting. There is something on the line, obviously, for the current president, Joe Biden. Usually the party in power in the White House loses seats in midterm election. That is what is expected. If Biden does lose both the House and the Senate, it substantially weakens him. It destroys his legislative mandate and almost makes him a lame duck at this point for the next couple of years, with the expectations that he may be running for a second term. So this is very much a referendum on Biden with the issue of the economy. The Democrats, of course, hoping that the Supreme Court's decision on abortion will rally enough of the pro-abortion supporters to get out and help them maintain possibly control of the U.S. Senate. They are expected to lose control of the lower house, the House of Representatives.
Pretty interesting. And just for the sake of our viewers, because elections vary from country to country, for the United States, presidential election holds, and then election into the House of Representatives and the Senate holds about 2 years later. How exactly does this work?
Yes. So what we have on Tuesday, all of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives are up for election because they hold 2-year terms and they run every 2 years. Senators have 6-year terms, and we have 100 senators, 2 for each state, and 34. So it's about 1/3 of those Senate seats are up for grabs in this election.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve, for bringing us up to speed. And of course, we'll be relying on our partners at VOA and our correspondents on the ground for coverage of the elections tomorrow. Thank you, Steve.
See you then. Thank you.
Well, back to COP27 as developments continue in Sharm el-Sheikh, the resort city in Egypt, where leaders, over 100 of them, are gathered to discuss over the next few days, almost 2 weeks, what happens and what they do about the climate and the agreements that they have made in the past year. Now, earlier we heard the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres speaking about the climate, telling world leaders they face a stark choice of either working together now to cut emissions or condemn future generations to climate catastrophe. Our environment correspondent Ayola Kasim put this together.
COP must be a moment of solidarity.
Since the world leaders sat in the climate summit in Glasgow last year, a war has started in Ukraine, and every corner of the world has witnessed alarming climate disasters. More so, 2022 is on track to be one of the warmest years on record. So as they gather here in the sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, the questions many are asking are, why are we not going further and why are we not moving faster?
The simple political will that is necessary, not just to come here and make promises, but to deliver on them and to make a definable difference in the lives of the people who we have a responsibility to serve, seems still not to be capable of being produced. I ask us how many more and how much more must happen.
Earlier, while welcoming the leaders, the Egyptian president urged them to become the models that will give the world hope, telling them climate change will never stop without their interventions.
Can we all work together? Do we have any other choice but to bring concrete action together? And so we must respond to the expectations of people across the world, people who are suffering more than ever the consequences of natural catastrophes. The intensity and frequency have never been so severe.
While acknowledging that there is a need to urgently end the war in Ukraine, the United Nations Secretary General reminded the leaders that with the climate crisis, we are getting dangerously close to the point of no return.
And the clock is ticking. We are in the fight of our lives, and we are losing. The war in Ukraine, other conflicts have caused so much bloodshed and violence and their dramatic impacts all over the world. But climate change is on a different timeline and a different scale. It is a defining issue of our age. It is the central challenge of our century. It is unacceptable, outrageous, and self-defeating to put it on the back burner.
On the sideline of the summit in Egypt, The Minister of Environment and leader of the Nigerian delegation says the country will be pushing for a positive funding action from developed countries.
We have to be sure that when we live here, we have strong, dependable, bankable commitments from these partners.
Accessing the 100 billion a year promise from developed countries to help developing nations deal with the consequences of global warming is particularly important now, following a year of wild weather disruptions that have killed many in Nigeria, Africa, and around the world. Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
Welcome back. You're still watching The World Today on Channels Television. There are elections coming up in Nicaragua, aren't there? President Daniel Ortega today cast his ballots at the ruling Sandinista National Liberation Front party, looking set to sweep the nationwide mayoral polls. The Sandinista party participates in the local elections together with 5 other political parties considered collaborators of the ruling party by the Nicaraguan opposition. In recent days, however, dissident organizations have called for abstentions because they consider the elections fraudulent. Elections were preceded by arrests and repression against opponents and their families. In recent months, authorities of Sandinista government have detained opposition figures and priests, while others have gone into exile. Nearly 4 million people are expected to participate in the elections to elect mayors, deputy governors and councillors. A Russian jets bombed camps near Syria's northwestern city of Idlib, killing at least 9 civilians in a flare-up of attacks on the last opposition-held bastion. According to witnesses and rescuers, warplanes flying at high altitude, aided by Syrian army artillery, also dropped bombs on forests near the makeshift camps west of Idlib. However, no immediate comment was available from Russia or its allies in the Syrian army, which says it targets the hideouts of insurgent groups and denies attacking civilians. The opposition's civil defense service said 3 children and a woman were among those killed in the strikes of the crowded camps, where more than 70 people were wounded and rushed to field hospitals. A video released by the organization shows an injured man with blood on his clothing being helped into an ambulance, as well as a baby with blood-stained clothes being carried onto an ambulance, with women also getting in. Tanzania's Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa has led mourners in paying their respects at a funeral service for 19 people killed after a passenger plane crashed into Lake Victoria. A prayers held at Bukoba Football Stadium, according to the area's regional commissioner, Albert Chalima. The plane crashed on Sunday morning near the shore at the end of the Bukoba Airport runway. Of the 43 people on board, only 24 survived. The passenger plane crashed into the Lake Victoria while attempting to land in stormy weather at an airport in the lakeside city of Bukoba. Video footage and images that circulated on social media show the plane almost fully submerged, with only its green and brown colored tail visible above the waterline of Lake Victoria, Africa's largest lake. Rescue boats were deployed and emergency workers continue to rescue other passengers trapped in the plane. Precision Air, Tanzania's largest privately owned airline, identified the plane as flight PW494 and said it was involved in an accident as it was approaching Bukoba Airport. The cause of the crash was not immediately clear. The state broadcaster TBC said the incident took place amid storms and heavy rains. One witness said he saw the plane flying unsteadily as it approached the airport in poor visibility conditions, saying it took a turn for the airport but missed and went into the lake. The airport has been closed until further notice. President Samia Suluhu Hassan has expressed her condolences to those affected and called for calm as rescue operations continue. And as we end the program, an Egyptian surgeon has created a fictional persona, Super H, it's known as, making social media videos with children before their operations. His TikTok videos show how singing and entertaining children could help them get through difficult medical procedures.
An Egyptian pediatrician and surgeon has replaced his white coat and stethoscope with a blue suit uniform and a red cape, introducing himself to his patients as a fictional superhero character. Dr. Hisham Abdelkader came up with the character Super H, which he uses to present social media content to help children have a healthier life. Using funny and playful TikTok videos that he films with children before undergoing operations, Abdelkader hopes to boost their morale and that of their parents before the procedure.
We do these videos as a step to break the ice, to tell the children not to worry about the operation room, and to break the fear of leaving their parents.
فيعني بنعمل الفيديوز دي as a step to break the ice.
When he saw his patients' fascination with the superhero characters he displays in his clinic, Abdelkader came up with Super H. The new fictional character is based on a story that this superhero landed in Cairo from another planet in his space shuttle and is now bound to help the children on this planet.
بس في الجيل الجديد اللي هم الأطفال دلوقتي وحاول أساعد أهلهم في إن هم يكونوا بصحة.
لقيت إن البورتال الشرعية عندنا أكلم الأطفال.
I always try to mix information with fun and entertainment because from my experience with children, when you give them information that they wouldn't like to listen to, mixed with something that they like, they will accept both.
Along with TikTok videos, Abdelkader started producing social media episodes addressing parents to help them understand some medical information, as well as how to deal with their children's condition.
Well, those kids must be having a lot of fun. I always thought it was sugar the children liked. Anyway, well, we said we'd end the program, right? But just before we go, North Korea, the military says recent South Korea-U.S. military exercises have been blamed as an open provocation and dangerous war drill, which is the reason why it's been firing so many missiles lately around the waters around North Korea and South Korea. Just last week, North Korea test-fired multiple missiles, including a possible failed intercontinental ballistic missile and hundreds of artillery shells into the sea, as South Korea and the United States carried out 6-day drills until Saturday. The North's army said it conducted activities stimulating various attacks on the air bases and aircraft, as well as a major South Korean city, to smash the enemy's persistent war hysteria. Its own words. North Korea's state news agency released photographs of recent missile launches. Well, the South is indicating it's no more friends with the North, at least for South Korea President Moon Jae-in. He plans to give up a pair of dogs sent by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as a gift following their 2018 summit, citing a lack of support from his successor. Moon has raised the white Pongsan dogs named Gomi and Songang since their arrival in the South and took them to his personal residence after his term ended in May. Moon's office said he was entrusted as their caretaker under consultations with the archives of the Interior Ministry. An unprecedented decision who had sought a legislative amendment to facilitate the move, including financial support. However, Moon's office said that effort fell apart due to unexplained opposition from the administration of incumbent President Yoon Suk-yeol, whose office denied foiling the move, saying the agencies are still discussing and it has not played any role. Who knew we'd be talking puppy diplomacy today? Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.